Hello and good morning. Welcome to Electronic Literature. This is section 2, and it is me, Professor Wayland. I guess I can go ahead and fade out the music. Let me do that. I like this music though. For section 1, the music it picked was random and it was like a little too bouncy for me. But this is good. I like the chilled out vibe there. I don't know. I'm using Pretzel, which is this streaming service, and oh, there's a bird too. Good morning, birds. Alright, so we've got one of the sparrows. I think it's a white-throated sparrow, but I'm not totally sure. And the Carolina wren is sort of hanging out, trying to find its way into the back of it. I think it's going to try to sneak attack here. Let's see. This Carolina wren has been really, like it climbs into stuff. Like it climbs into like my grill or my table saw setup. There it goes. Okay, it just chased off the other one. Anyway, always kind of fun to watch what that Carolina wren is up to. Yeah, good morning, birds. So good morning. I've been saying good morning to you all on the chat thing there. So good to see you all today. Hope you don't mind me switching back to Twitch for today, but a couple of reasons. First of all, I haven't used Twitch for a couple of weeks because of different things going on in the schedule. Also, I wanted to today actually demonstrate Patchwork Girl again, and I say again, but really this is the real demo of it, because before I showed you a version of it that was missing a huge component of that work, which is the graphics, but I have it working now, and so I'm going to show you that shortly for today. And also I would like to discuss Shell Song. I say discuss, really it's going to be me talking because of how this is set up today, but I do want to actually hear about your responses to Shell Song on Wednesday, because this is a pretty interesting work and it's new, and I always like, with new work, I kind of like exploring my responses with people that are also experiencing it for the first time. So that's something we can hopefully do a little bit on Wednesday, but I'll share some thoughts and ideas today to get started with that after talking about Patchwork Girl for a bit. There's the cardinal. This is great. There were no birds at all during the first section, so they were just kind of waiting for you all. So there you go. Congratulations. So today I just have a couple of bullet points here to remind me. And it looks like Bobby's typing, so maybe you have a question, Bobby, and I'll certainly try to get to that. But yeah, they do seem to like you all better. So some reminders. So you obviously hopefully know tomorrow is your second spring break for this semester. So take it easy. But there will be a quiz for this class on Friday. So this is sorry, I just saw Bobby's question. I'm trying to understand your question. Well, so Bobby, I can show you that, but I'm going to be talking about other stuff. Literally, like if you just Google how to make a zip file, I imagine you'll find some help. I also don't remember if you're on Windows or Mac, so that does make a difference. But if it's on I can just tell you too, like if you have a folder, right? Like if you have something that's a folder or even a single file, if you right click on it, you'll get an option. And if it's on a Mac, it'll be compress. It'll just say compress whatever you've selected if you right click on it. And then if you are on Windows, you have to say right click and then it says send to, and then you can say send it to a compressed or zipped archive. So hopefully one of those two options makes sense. Whichever it is, I don't remember. So many birds today. Yeah, the juncos are, I usually expect the juncos by now, and they're around, but they're not up there because the cardinal is kind of taking over. Anyway, cool. So yeah, so quiz this Friday, and this will be a bigger quiz in the sense that it covers more territory, and so therefore will probably be some more questions, like more than the previous quiz. And I think at least there will be one difference will be 3 essay questions instead of 2. Similar kind of structure where it'll be open note, open book, open whatever. So you have a ton of resources available to you while you work on it. I really recommend spending as much time as you need to make sure you get it all right. I really want everyone to get all these things right. So, because I want you to know these things. And so if you take the quiz and you get them wrong, that tells me you don't know these things or you don't know how to find these things. And so that concerns me a bit. So I want you to know these things, right? So there he is, Junko. So it's good lighting on the bird feeder today too, I think, because that's one aspect of the time change. So same structure, but one thing we'll do on Wednesday is I'll give you an opportunity to brainstorm and come up with some sample essay questions like we did before. I thought that was good. And part of the purpose is that it lets me hear from you what you think are the important concepts and questions that we've been talking about this semester so far. And so, yeah, I think I thought that worked well last time, and I'd like to continue that again. But I'll probably think of some more, sample questions for myself to put in there. I like the idea of giving you different options to choose, so you can kind of answer the one that you feel the most confident in or the most interested in. And I think most of you did quite well on that on the first quiz. So what else was I going to say about the quiz? Oh yeah, so the other thing is the quiz is going to cover combinatory poetics, so that's chapter 2 of the textbook, and hypertext, which is chapter 3 of the textbook. Both of those are pretty long chapters. Both of those are in Perusall, so you can look at them there with links and discussion on different parts of them. We've covered a lot in class, but also there's just a lot more that I haven't got to. But because it's in the textbook, I am going to assume, or I am going to expect you to know it, right? So, and I say that especially because this is an open book kind of quiz, right? Like if I mention something in a quiz question that you don't remember us talking about, you can open it up in the textbook and go right to it, hopefully. So I will be covering a lot of that. That said, I think it will be really helpful if you are looking for something to do for homework, right? Because there's the standard homework option still this Wednesday. There are probably some things that aren't in the collaborative notes document yet. So as you review chapters 2 and 3, if you see something that you think needs to be noted, make sure you add it into those days, or the respective headings for the collaborative note doc. Or if you look in the collaborative note doc and there's a day that's blank, like if there's no entry for a particular day, then please add it, because we did something that day. All the videos are archived, so you can look for the Zoom links in Canvas. You can find the Zoom videos if you want to look at that. I don't know how, I still haven't figured out how to get the automatic transcript from those, but it might be there. If you figure out how to find that, then please tell me. But I've heard it exists. I just haven't been able to find it. There might be some setting I'm supposed to enable, but I can't find. I don't know how to do that. So let me know. But the other thing is, just like there's notes. So there's some information in the schedule, right, about what we covered. So make sure that those things mentioned in the schedule are definitely well documented and explained in the collaborative notes doc. Okay, so let me know if you have any questions about that, about the quiz and how to prepare for it. But we will spend time on Wednesday preparing for you, so that we're not totally done with that conversation. On Wednesday, it'll be the even face-to-face cohort again. So, odd group, you're still the odd one out. But I will see you all next week, right? I just thought it made sense to keep with the even-odd pattern the way we had it, and just skip the odd group for that week. So, sorry for the inconvenience for the odd group. But if there are any of you in the odd group that are really desperate to come in person, I can probably squeeze in 1 or 2 people. Just let me know so we can figure it out. If necessary, you might have to trade places with somebody. Maybe not, but let me know if that's the case. But the main constraint there is that we can only fit 9 people in the classroom at a time. So that's all we have to work with. All right, so the other thing is homework. I wanted to just give you all a little bit of reminder / encouragement about the homework. And I put a comment in the Discoveries channel about this last night. Just to remind you that if you're going to do the Discoveries channel, or Discovery option, I keep thinking of Discovery Channel like the TV channel. I just want to remind you that I really do want you to discuss these a little bit. So it's not just like pasting a URL, but like actually explain why you chose that work and why you think it was worth sharing with everyone. And part of that could be like, why is this literary? Like, what's literary about this work? Because I certainly take an expansive view of electronic literature, like what gets to count. But I still think for things on the edge of that conventional definition, I think it makes sense to articulate why something is worth our attention for the conversation we're having in this class about electronic literature. So I really do want, this says, this is in instructions. I do want you to say a little bit about it. Certainly a link to it, but maybe I expect basically a paragraph explaining like why you chose this thing and what you liked about it, or what you found interesting about it or disturbing about it, whatever your response is. I want to see that, right? So as I mentioned there, obviously there's lots of Twitter bots out there, but not all of them are going to have like a literary orientation. Some might be more artistic, and that's interesting too, and that would be fine if you want to talk about those. Others are just kind of utilitarian, and so I don't know how they fit as literature. But if you can make the case or you want to talk about them that way, that's great. But please do, please do talk about it that way. Don't just kind of assume that it makes sense as a literary work. That's why I'm asking for the exposition from you. If you're trying to find works, right, so volumes 1, 2, and 3 of the electronic literature collection have quite a few in there. Of course, you will have to navigate those a bit because some require Flash, and there's not currently an easy workflow to get those working. It is possible, but maybe not right away. Maybe there's other things you'd like to look at instead. ElmSip, you can find tons of works here. So if you go in this, oops, oh, that's the wrong link. That's why you maybe, why is that not the right link? Hang on, let me fix this. So it's not that. That's the same URL. What? Oh, the www doesn't work. That's bizarre. Let me fix that. That's a really old-fashioned distinction to have to make, but that's fine. But they set it up that way. I just didn't realize it. Most modern web servers since 2000 or so, the www subdomain is implied and doesn't have to be specific. But here it's not even an option. They just haven't actually set it up that way at all. But anyway, just go to elmsip.net. If you can't find it, you can just Google it. But once you're here, you can find things. They've got 3,595 records for creative works in here, so that's a ton of things, right? So hopefully you can find something that you find interesting. You can also search by tags and categories and stuff. So if you're interested in hypertext, here's 587 hypertext works. So you'll find something, I'm pretty sure. All right. Bobby's asking the question about the peer review document. You can find that if you go to, under Canvas, if you go to collaborations. I think this is one you're looking for, and your whatever peer review group you're in, you should see one, but there was an issue where some people were seeing both 2B and 2E, and I don't know why, but you should just see one of those. And when I set up that collaboration, Bobby, it should have automatically invited you to join that document, so you should also be able to find it in your Google Drive if you just go to your Drive folder and search for it. Peer review sheet, whatever, it should come up. And since you have a zip file, you'll have to also upload that zip file somewhere and then share it make it shareable so that your peers can access it. Right, you can't just embed a zip file in a Google Doc. You'd have to upload it and then attach it. Upload it somewhere else, to Google Drive, and then share the link to it, and then that link is what you would add to the Google Doc. I don't know if that makes sense the way I'm explaining it. Those are the things you would need to do, though. Hopefully you can figure that out, but if not, just let me know. We can talk a little bit later. So I'm going to switch computers here and share with you all some new things. I want to actually, I wonder if I could something just occurred to me that I can do to make this a little bit easier in OBS. Because I'm going to pull my laptop in here. But I think I can just do this as, yeah, that works. Okay, cool. So let me make an adjustment here. But this is my laptop. I'm here twice. Hang on. Let me adjust myself a little bit more. Okay, that's good enough, I suppose. Okay, so this is my laptop running another computer and in emulation. So let me kind of reset a few things here. No, I'm going to start over again. So the layers here I think are actually interesting. So the things that I have to do to get this to you all through Twitch right now are kind of interesting. So let me just resize this a little bit. Oops, nope, that's the wrong one. I didn't want to resize that one. Sometimes in OBS it's hard to tell which thing you're selecting. Oh, that's why. Okay. Sorry, I should have done this before class, but I'm doing it now. That's okay. It didn't occur to me that I could do this until just now. So you know what, I'm going to do it like this so that I can show it to you better. I'm trying to show you as much of this emulated screen as possible. Okay, so, oh, and we lost the bird cam. Come on back, where bird cam. There you are. Okay, so this is the, this is what's going on. So I'm using my Mac, which is over here, my Mac laptop, Mac OS, whatever it is, Catalina. My MacBook, my 5-year-old MacBook Pro is here, and it's running an emulator of Macintosh OS 7.6, which is pretty old. I don't remember the exact year, but I want to say 92 or 3. I don't know. Mac OS 7 was kind of their big 90s upgrade. And so this is, I mean, I have a computer that only runs this operating system, but I don't have it with me. So this is an emulator of it. This is, earlier I demonstrated story space using Mac OS 9, which I am able to emulate on my Windows computer, and this OS 7 I'm able to emulate on my Mac computer. So it's kind of complicated that way. But we've got Mac OS 7 here running in an emulator that's being run on this computer, and then this computer's video output is being piped in through through a capture card into this PC, and then broadcast to you all through Twitch and YouTube at the same time. So it's going through all these different channels, but it's pretty cool to kind of think about how this comes together. And this is the result, is that we finally have a working version of Patchwork Girl that I can actually show you. So I'm going to do that now, and this is going to be, you've seen some of this before, but I want to show you a couple of pretty important things that I couldn't show you before because of the version not working. So let me, yeah, that's probably good. Okay, so let me just open it here. It's a little bit slow, but it's not too bad, actually. So I'm going to begin a new reading, and if you remember, one of the main things that I told you was missing from the version I showed you before was the graphics. And so here's the graphics. I can finally show you the graphics. The look, the basic style of this, you should recognize from my Body of Wonder camera. This kind of black and white kind of GIF. What's the word? Can't think of the word for that kind of color shading, but it's dippling, is that the word? I can't remember, but it's there's a body here. The body in question, as we learned by clicking anywhere on it, is the Patchwork Girl, the modern monster. This is the second attempt by Dr. Frankenstein to create a living being from dead tissue, and what we're seeing here as we read this work is we're seeing her perspective, but it's a perspective that's fragmented and that is composed of the disjointed but reassembled points of view of the different women whose bodies donated parts to her body, not really consensually, right? I mean, these were organs and body parts that were harvested by Dr. Frankenstein and then put together without anyone's consent. So that is a theme that you'll see in here. And one of the themes that I think is resonant with this work, like the other hypertext works I showed you, especially the earlier works, is kind of a question, really. I posited a theory that when we consider hypertext in a formal sense, like what it lets us do with textuality, we have pieces that are being navigated and held together as a total work as a result of fragmentation. So the sense of fragmentation is very common, you might say endemic to hypertext fiction, especially in Generation 1. And I think that is linked with, or seems resonant at least, with a theme of trauma in these works, specifically like accident trauma, like car accidents. So we saw that in I Have Said Nothing and in Afternoon a Story. Both of those have car accidents as kind of their central event in those stories. I think other works like 12 Blue and Lust and Califia, sort of, not as much with Califia. And what else did we look at? Yeah, Samplers, some of the stories in Samplers, but not all of them. There is an element of trauma to many of these stories. And I wonder if that has to do with the choice for hypertext. When we look at these authors choosing to use hypertext, perhaps hypertext lets them tell the story that focuses on or bears witness to trauma in a way that other platforms or structures don't quite afford. And so I wonder about that in this work, whether there's a sense of trauma. There definitely is a sense of trauma in this work, I guess. That's my way of saying that. But let's take a look at it. And again, this is I finally get to explore it. Let's take a look at the graveyard first. Oops, I clicked too fast. I forget, sometimes you need one click and sometimes you need two. So let me go back. Oh yeah, one of the things you can do here is you can actually use the question mark to go back to where you were. So let's say, so this is actually showing me the history of where I've been, and it uses the term spaces in this version. So these are lexia in the hypertext vocabulary sense, but it uses the term space for these. It's basically equivalent to what Twine calls a passage. So we can go back to her story, haircut 4, and that should be good. So haircut 4, like all these haircuts are, well, each of these documents that you see here that are graphics show up in these red colored spaces, which all emanate from the title page or the body page. And they, well, actually they do all come from the body page. And you can see that they all have these arrows here. The arrows also didn't show up in the last version I showed you, so this is another pretty big and important difference. But each of these, haircut 4, haircut 3, haircut, and haircut 2, each of these have an image associated with them. This one focuses on a head, and it's titled Phrenology. And the idea here is that phrenology, as you probably know, is the pseudoscience of being able to read characteristics, psychological and moral characteristics of a person by analyzing the lumps on their skull. And it's a pseudoscience. It's not true, but it's a science that was believed to be true in the, I think it's as late as the 19th century. So the idea here, you have different words along the skull here. Some of these are going to take you to specific passages. Others will just kind of jump you into this particular like chapter for this work. If you ever get lost in here, by the way, you can always click on this question mark and that takes you in. And this particular passage I find pretty interesting. So I'm going to make that the current passage so we can view it. And it says something that I think reflects on the work as a whole. So this writing: assembling these patched words in an electronic space, I feel half blind, as if the entire text is within reach, but because of some myopic condition I am only familiar with from dreams, I can see only that part most immediately before me. So it's describing, I think, our experience of reading this text, but it's describing this experience of the text from the point of view of the author or speaker we imagine behind the text. And that's another big idea in this work, is that we know Shelley Jackson created this work, but our idea of the author of this work and the voice of the narrator of this work is something that we construct as we move through it, which you might say is what we always do when we read fiction. But here, this author that we hear directly from in a kind of fourth wall breaking moment is telling us something about their experience of this work, which happens to follow our experience in terms of its difference and its unique status as hypertext. So let me show you how that plays out. So I can see only that part most immediately before me and have no sense of how that part relates to the rest. When I open a book, I know where I am, which is restful. My reading is spatial and even volumetric. I tell myself I am a third of the way down through a rectangular solid. I am a quarter of the way down the page. I am here on the page, here on this line, here, here, here. What that's referring to is, like, we think of a book as straightforward, and it is, but we experience it spatially. We can think of it, it's a rectangular solid. We can think of a place on it being a quarter of the way down the page, here on this line, and so on. Like, we think of it in terms of location, whereas that's the thing that we are almost always grasping for and failing to grasp in hypertext. That idea that we can never quite get that sense of confidence in terms of our place. And that's a deliberate choice. That's a part of the poetics, or at least the textuality of this. But where am I now? I am in a here and a present moment that has no history and no expectations for the future. Or rather, history is only a haphazard hopscotch through other present moments. How I got from one to the other is unclear. Though I could list my past moments, they would remain discrete and recombinant in potential, if not in fact, hence without shape, without end, without story, or with as many stories as I care to put together. And what I think that last paragraph is referring to is actually this device here that shows up when you click the question mark, where you can make a haphazard hopscotch, which is kind of how I've been reading it. I've just been kind of popping from thing to thing, or you can also look at the list of past moments, which you can see here as recently visited spaces, sorry, I just saw your question, Amber. No, Amber's, I can't remember if Amber's watching now, but I will answer your question later, Amber. Yeah, or you can put it together as you want to, right? So we're basically reassembling this, the body of this person that we are reading about as we read the text, and we are literally kind of stitching them together as we follow different paths, as we link from thing to thing. And we think of a link, right, as a thing you click on, but it also is a thing that connects two things together, so it kind of being sewed together by our movement through it is something that I think is almost literally true as we experience it. So the other things I wanted to show you about this version of it, and some of these ideas and themes we've already kind of touched on in the other reading of it, but I wanted you to see it in the original StorySpace reader. I really wish I could give you access to this. The challenge is that there's a non-trivial setup process as I had to go through, but the other challenge is, of course, copyright. Right, so let's see. The other thing I wanted to show you, one of the things that is kind of tricky about this version of StorySpace is that you end up with these two windows, at least two windows, maybe 3 or 4, and kind of finding your way among them is sort of tricky, and whenever you switch to one, it doesn't necessarily show you the other one. So so I jumped into the Crazy Quilt chapter or whatever, but I have to actually move things around in order to see the text of this particular passage, which is called Scraps, and then I can see kind of how we get here and where we can go from. What you can see in here, by the way, is if you remember Dina Larsson's Samplers, it was a StorySpace work where the passages were arranged in ways that mimicked different quilt patterns. This work came a little bit later, and so it uses a similar idea. But you can see the pattern here a little bit with the color scheme, but also there's a pattern to the way that these passages connect to each other, and you can kind of follow the lines of the arrows here to make different patterns throughout this particular passage. And of course, as you hopefully recall with StorySpace, you can see me zooming in and out of different levels. So I think I'm at the lowest level now for this particular area, but I can zoom back up and then zoom back up one more time to get back to the title page. So yeah, there you go. That is another demo of Patchwork Girl. Actually, let's take a look at this one before I leave it entirely. Let me go into story here, because this is a whole section that kind of breaks down. I wanted to move that. I'm going to start with the manuscript. Yeah, so there's so much in here. Oh wow, this is really deep, right? I mean, it literally goes very, very deep. Oh, and I forgot about this view too. You can also view it as a tree, but I like looking at it as a space. Just trying to find a good place to start here. There you go. You can kind of work your way through it. But you see what the problem I'm saying is, like, the passage that contains the text is like hidden. Now, one thing I do like about the new reader is that you can, like, these two different views are reliably placed, like the contents of the passage and the navigator part of it. But that benefit doesn't outweigh the major drawback, which is that the graphics don't work. Okay, so that was Patchwork Girl again, and I really wish I could give you a way to access it, but hopefully that'll do. I believe you can find a longer traversal of it by Shelley Jackson on YouTube, and if I do, I might share that. I do hope you know about it, and we'll probably ask you a question or two about Patchwork Girl on the quiz on Friday. Okay, so let's take a look then at Shell Song by Everest Pipkin, and I say let's, but really it's me. So let me take a look at Shell Song by Everest Pipkin, and I'm trying to find, this is the right tab, sure. And I'll just start it over again. As you can see there, I was trying to peek under the hood. I always start doing that with these kind of things. And as I think I told you all, this is a new work for me. Like, it's a new work overall, but it's also just, I didn't know about it until the other day, and but I thought it was unusually well suited for kind of where we are in the class right now, so I thought it would be a good idea to share with you all. But that said, because this is a new work to me, I don't really have like a set of bullet pointed ideas that I want to talk about with it. Like, I don't have like a lecture or a set of like major takeaways that you should add to the notes document, although you certainly should add notes. But I'm mainly interested in just in your response to it and your interpretations of it, your ideas about it, just because it's a new work, and I find that really a useful thing to do. I will play a few passages of it, or I say play because, as you know from experiencing it, it has audio, and the audio is a big part of this. In fact, if you access this without audio, I would argue you missed the point entirely, so make sure you do experience it with audio. It says it takes 30-40 minutes. It took me closer to an hour, I think. I wasn't really timing it, but I think one reason it took me a little longer is that I kept opening tabs and looking for background information on some of the things that were coming up in the work. So Maybe you could get through it quicker than I did. Or there might be certain choices I made that led me down longer passages before I got to the end. I'm not sure. One of the things that I'm not sure about actually is the basic platform. I mean, it's using HTML and JavaScript. It is possible that Everest programmed this in Twine initially and then wrote kind of a different interface for Twine. I say different because there are some differences here. Like, it looks like Twine and you might recognize that, or you might recognize that just the text and the fact that there are links here, it has a feeling of Twine. But one of the major things that is different is that you can't go back. Of course you have audio, but you can add audio in Twine. I suspect that this is probably just a bespoke custom product that Everest has put together for this, but it could also have had some origin in Twine as well. I have so far resisted the temptation to try to reverse engineer it and understand how it works. I just think there are reasons perhaps it's better to keep it on its own terms, if that makes sense. So let it kind of be what it is. That said, it does make it hard to talk about specific parts of it. I took a whole bunch of screenshots as I was working my way through it, but even that doesn't help because the screenshots it's just one passage at a time. It doesn't have the context. In many cases, I was interested in like how I got to certain passages and how certain ideas developed over several passages. So I don't know if the screenshots will be totally helpful, but that's all I can recommend actually. As you're working through this and thinking through it, screenshots would be a good idea as far as capturing capturing it. So let me just play go through a couple of screens of it here.
I was 19 years old when I discovered I was face blind. Or to be more accurate, when I discovered that other people were not.
So we're hearing a voice here, and as you hopefully know from the work, that is not actually Everest Pipkin's voice, but it is close to Everest's voice. And so that idea of close but not quite is kind of the thing that this work is most preoccupied with, I think. That's the big theme, the sense of where that idea of that voice comes from, and then all of the things that we associate with that voice when we hear it, even if we don't mean to. Right. So I think that this is the kind of work that would be much more interesting to have a conversation about as opposed to me talking to you all about it. But I will pose a few questions, and you may want to answer in the chat if you feel like it. But at what point in this work, when you were listening to it, did you realize that the voice that you hear through most of this is AI generated and not an actual recorded voice? And I'll pose that question to you all, but you can answer if you have anything. But I'll move on here too as well.
Face blindness or prosopagnosia is the inability to remember or recognize others by their faces, even familiar faces.
Yeah. I should say also, by the way, that as far as I know, this is a work by Everest Pipkin, and I believe it is autobiographical in the sense that we can take certain parts about it to be true in this sense. I don't know for sure, of course, because this is a work that has a fictional context. I mean, it is a narrative work, and so it probably is best considered a work of creative nonfiction, I think. So it's almost more of a hypertext essay. That said, I don't think we should take every claim here as literally true necessarily. And also, that's part of what this work is trying to think about, is this idea of who we imagine on the other side of the screen or the other side of our ears, whatever the modality is. We construct an idea of the person we're hearing from based on whatever we're given. And I think that Everest is playing with that here quite a bit in terms of that. So I think that these are true things that Everest is telling us here, but whether it's literally true or biographically true or biometrically true is kind of the question of the work. So I just mentioned that because this mentions a particular situation, or I guess condition, of face blindness, and so I don't know if they actually are face blind, but it certainly is possible, and it certainly makes sense for the context of this work. Yeah, so it looks like how you say a little way in. So in other words, it wasn't obvious to begin with. So when I was in I think I told you all I heard this. I was introduced to this work in a talk that Everest was doing last weekend or last Thursday, and they were talking about, like, they introduced this work by saying, "This is a AI voice. This isn't really me." So that I never kind of had that moment of trying to decide which is which. I always knew from the beginning. That said, as you get into it, hopefully you notice that sometimes it is actually Everest's voice. It is actually a recorded voice. So it is really interesting, those moments when they choose to speak as themselves, and hearing the differences in the different text-to-speech platforms that they use, and then actual what I believe are actual recordings of their voice. That's a really interesting moment in this work later on. There's a couple of giveaways, I think, and it's almost like the audio equivalent of like the giveaways that let you know that when you're looking at a face generated by StyleGAN2 that you can recognize that actually that's not quite right. So if you look at StyleGAN2 faces, those generated like for this person does not exist.com, you'll start to notice that there are certain giveaways, like the edges of their face is usually kind of weird, the hairlines are kind of weird, teeth are sometimes kind of weird. So there's certain details that you kind of learn to look for if you're trying to decide if a face is real or not. And there are certain aspects of the audio here that are also kind of giveaways. Certain words tend to be hard to pronounce, or like for AI to determine the correct pronunciation of in the context. And so that kind of gives it away in a couple of situations here.
When you are face blind, voices become important. You learn to recognize people in different ways: posture, style, haircut, glasses.
You know, and I usually, whenever I'm demonstrating hypertext work, especially, I usually narrate it as I read it, but this is interesting because I don't have to in this case. I can let this work speak for itself.
Mannerisms. The way they hold their bodies in the world.
So if we think about this work and kind of the questions it's raising or the ideas it's putting out there, I think bodies or embodiment is a big one. I think the embodiment of gender is a really big one too. Of course, data is a big one. The idea of how data and algorithms come to reflect or create these doubles of gendered bodies and sort of reflect them back to us and in ways that can seem strange and are inaccurate in some cases. I think that's a big, that's a theme, like following this work or haunting this work, I guess. I noticed, by the way, like looking at the source code, this is the HTML source code, and Everest has added this set of keywords that describe it. Really, it's a list of, it's the meta tag description, but it includes keywords in it, which is, this is an audio and hypertext work about data sets, ghosts, bodies, corporate deepfake technologies, and surveillance. So that kind of gives it away in terms of certain themes, and I listed a few themes that I noticed before noticing that meta tag also gave us some more things to think about. But certainly embodiment, data, surveillance, haunting, and ghosts I think is really an interesting one too, because it's a little bit more subtle throughout this work. But yeah, the idea of bodies in a world,
but mostly by the sound of their voice,
is kind of what we're interested in here. So here's some questions that I'd like for you to think about, and if you have ideas you can share them now, or if not, hopefully we can talk about them on Wednesday. And there's certainly other questions as well, but these might be good starting points on Wednesday. Why is this called Shell Song? Why is that the title? Right? I mean, that's kind of maybe a big one. I don't know. That phrase does not appear in the work as far as I know. I didn't come across it, but I can think of a couple different reasons why that might be the right choice for this title. Why Everest might have chosen this title. Why do you think this is presented in text and audio? So it's only text that we read with our eyes and hear with our ears. So why is that? Like, we know that if you looked at Everest Pipkin's website, which I linked in the schedule and the announcement, you can see that they're very talented visual artists and can work with graphic work very competently, very well. And so they've chosen here not to do that. And so there might be some reason behind that. So what do you think? Why do you think that is the case? Also, like the whole idea here is when we're talking about AI generated voices, it raises the question of ownership. And what we're seeing here in this opening bit is that you get to know people by the sound of their voice. And there's a way that the sound of someone's voice becomes a kind of stand-in for their identity in your mind as you relate to them. It's a way of relating to and understanding that person when they're not there. They don't have to be present for you to hear their voice and to recognize their presence or their identity or their bodies. But we form those ideas even if we've never met a person. But anyway, the bigger theme here has to do with how does that get into data? Like how does our voice become data? How does the voice become something that can be commodified, like bought and sold, owned? And there are many ways. And I even raised that question here, who has your voice? Like who has your biometric data? I don't know. But let's take a look at some of the examples here. I do want to spend a lot more time with this work. I find it really fascinating. So I'm going to move into some of the examples of things that came up in the work, so I can show those to you to make sure you're familiar with them. But these are things that we can talk about. We can talk about the work in some more detail on Wednesday, I hope. So the LibriVox is a big, I guess, player in this work. LibriVox is a catalog of books that are in the public domain, which means that they are free for anyone to access and to create derivative work of, including the kind that you see here, which is audio versions of these works. So you can contribute your own voice to this. You can read books for other people, or you can download and listen to books read by others. This is something that many people find convenient. You can plug this into like your Alexa, and you can hear it speak to you and hear it. You hear the audio that someone has recorded for these certain books. My kids have done that, and for classic books, it's sometimes a good way to experience those. Of course, it depends on who's like reading it and what they do with it. But because the works here are the recordings also become public domain. This is something that Everest reflects on. Those voices that are here also become data for machine learning, and so they become ingested into the algorithms that inform and create these AI-generated voices. AI always needs data. Machine learning always needs data. The more data you can get, and here's a huge data set of audio, vocal data keyed to and indexed to text, and so it's a perfect resource for that kind of work, and it has been used that way. This is because these audio works are in the public domain. The people who recorded it have no say in how their work ends up being used. If it's in the public domain, it can be used by anybody for anything, and that's within the bounds of ethics, I suppose. But that is the case, and so it is possible. And one of the things that I think is hinted at that Everest is thinking about here is that because their voice is in LibriVox, and in that data set that does all those machines we're training on to create the different products that we see, like Overdub and Resemble and Alethea, because their voice in its initial form, I don't know why these are so creepy, but I know why they're creepy, but I don't know why this company chose these as the feature for their product, because they're terrifying. What was I saying? Oh yeah, so because Everest voice has been used to train these putative avatar voices, there is a sense in that it, even though we're hearing what they tell us is a machine-generated voice, and it is an AI-generated voice, there is a sense in which Everest voice has informed this voice. And perhaps yours has as well if you've ever contributed to LibriVox, or if you've ever had your audio recorded in some other context by some other platform where there was some clause in the terms of service that allowed your biometric data that included your voice to be sold as a commodity or used by researchers in producing these kinds of things. So there's a way in which the voice that we hear when we work our way through Shell Song,
I'd have a hard time describing the voice.
It's trained to sound like Everest, or they've set it up that way. But how it knows how to sound like someone is informed by all these layers of training that included data that might have originally included the real Everest, or me, or you, or anyone else. And that's the fascinating way that we become estranged from ourselves through data. So let me show you a couple more examples that come up here in this work. So LibriVox, the other thing, I thought this was really cool, and this was one of the examples, or one of the cases where I was like surprised that, or really noticed that that Shell Song did not include graphics, because they describe in it this particular like notation for speech, and it sounds really interesting, and it's even described as looking really interesting. So I was like, well, I want to see it. So of course I Googled it and I found this Wikipedia page. So this is, I guess, a notation system for making sounds, and so this is a way of kind of from what I understand, if I'm reading this right, like in Figure 2, when you see these different like shapes, they are glyphs. I mean, they're characters like in a language or character system, but they are meant to illustrate the shape of different like mouth parts in producing different sounds. And there's a kind of a code to it, but it's actually meant to sort of be a picture of your mouth and your vocal cords working together to produce specific sounds in combination. So really pretty interesting. In terms of the audio bit here, let me see if I have this in my YouTube history. Yeah, I was looking at a couple of pretty random things this morning, but oh yeah, this is an example of a device built to use that technology to make sounds, and it sounds pretty weird. Yeah, it just sort of sounds like a cow. I don't know. It's supposed to sound like something specific though. Let me see if this one might be actually closer to understanding what it's actually saying. This is in German, but let's see. My headphones are way down here, so I have to come down here. I don't think I would have interpreted any of those sounds correctly without the text on the screen to tell me what sounds I was supposed to be hearing. So, yeah, it's a kind of a weird technology. Yeah, a lot of these do make you uncomfortable, or me uncomfortable too. Another one that can be creepy is, let's see if I have it in my history. Oh yeah, check this out. Speaking of things that will make you uncomfortable. So this is a 17th century, I think, automaton. Trying to see the actual year of it, but it's a little, you might say robot, but it's really, I think automaton is a technically correct word. It's a little priest or monk that kind of moves around. He can move his head and mouth and hands, but it's all clockwork, so it's not like a robot making decisions about what to do when, but it's like following a script essentially, kind of like a Chuck E. Cheese animatron kind of thing. And it's praying basically. And what it's doing is mechanizing the act of prayer. And if we believe that these prayers are legit, it's a way of kind of being more efficient with your prayer time. So if you're a monk, you don't have to spend all your time praying. You have a little robot that can pray on your behalf much more efficiently than you can, and much more continuously than you can. The result is quite uncanny, I think. And so, I don't know how popular this was at the time. This was an incredibly expensive thing to produce in the 17th century, but it's a pretty fascinating piece of like robot history, I guess, right? So the other thing I wanted to show and allow you to listen to is the robot, or the IBM computer playing and singing the song Daisy Bell. Let me make sure I'm at the right part. Here we go. It's a nice little waltz tune, right? It's gonna start singing on the next bar. This is on TikTok? Wow. Okay. I want to hear more about that, Elena. I'm very interested. I'll let it finish this first, though. All right. So a famously creepy bit of vocal audio, and this is it's a classic of kind of computer history, but it's also famous and noteworthy because it was the inspiration for HAL 9000's voice in 2001: A Space Odyssey, and HAL sings this song as the human operator is essentially taking his brain apart so that he doesn't kill the humans, basically. So it's in the moment of the movie, it's kind of sad. But also HAL 9000 is a real threat, and so taking HAL 9000 apart kind of makes sense. I have no idea what this is, by the way. It's always fascinating what YouTube pops up to recommend whenever I show my screen like this. You never know what's going to come up. But so this is part of the background of like the computer text to speech, right? Text to speech technology. This is the first example of that, or one of the first examples of that. And it's similar to, if you might remember, I showed a clip from Colossus, the Forbin project in my other class. That's a device called a vocoder, which can mimic human speech, but I think it was an actor passing their voice through a vocoder. Yeah. So it has become. I think it's a trope, DJ. I think that's what you're saying. Is like you'll see it come up as a. And whenever people hear this song or reference this song, they almost always have in mind HAL 9000, and HAL 9000 was based on this story here. So there's a lot of background that's connecting there. So I'm really interested to see if, and Elena, thanks for sharing the TikTok. I'm curious to see if any of those TikToks pick up on that trope, like using it as that trope or something else. Like TikTok is still a very I don't have TikTok, and I'm not really planning to get on TikTok, but I am interested to see how it might be used for creative or even literary kind of projects, and this could be one. I don't know. I'm curious. Cool. So we're at 12:10, 12:12 actually. So I'm gonna wrap it up here. There are a few more things I wanted to show you. One of them, and I'll just show you the page really quickly, is genderlessvoice.com, and this is an example that Salsong talks about as an attempt to make a voice without gender. And so there are two ways in which this product makes that claim. First of all, it used as training data voices and vocal samples recorded by people who don't identify as a specific gender, or that are gender non-binary or non-conforming in some way. And so it used gender non-binary or genderless data to begin with. And then it also illustrates here, if you play it,
the world's first,
and I assume it's playing now, I don't have my headphones on. You can change the frequency, which changes the perception of the gender of the speaker. And that idea of the perceived gender of a non-gendered person is really interesting, because in this case there is no gender there. And so all the gender that we report in our ears, that we imagine in our ears, are results of the frequency and not of the actual gender of the people whose voices are being used here. So pretty interesting experiment, and I assume it's still playing.
I need your help. Share my voice with Apple,
Yeah.
Amazon,
I need to get a longer cord for my headphones.
and together we can ensure that technology recognizes us all. Thanks for listening, Q.
Yeah, I think they probably regret naming their character Q, given all the QAnon stuff. But in any case, a really fascinating experiment and product, and also like a really good, I guess, idea behind it, because as you know, if you have or ever use voice assisted technologies like Alexa or Siri, they have gender, or we think of them as having gender, and we use the feminine pronouns often to talk about them. But that's all completely arbitrary, and that's a kind of identity that's not earned by that AI, because there is no gender there. It's just a robot, right? But it kind of imagines gender, and also kind of plays into the idea of gender as a cultural construct. So cool. Well, I'm gonna wrap it up here today. I see Moon, you're saying you were about to say something, so you can finish your thought if you want to, but I'm gonna switch to the bird cam for the last few minutes here, and just who knows if something will come by. Maybe not. I'll put on some music and switch to the bird cam, and I'll stay online if anyone wants to chat on Discord. So I'll see even cohort on Wednesday. Everyone else I'll see online on Wednesday. And then on Friday, I will see everyone on Zoom. And the quiz will happen between Wednesday and Friday. All right, so I'll see you later, everyone. Have a good afternoon.